Hello world, my name is Tim Roswick and welcome back to another daily game dev video. Today we're talking about Information Horizon. This is another video in my series on game design theory, and we're going to talk about some cool stuff and you're going to learn some game design. It's going to be awesome. So Information Horizon is a concept that I first heard of from Keith Burgun. He's a game designer that I really respect, and he runs a podcast called the Clockwork Game Dev Podcast. I recommend you guys check that out. The concept behind what Information Horizon is basically the amount of information that a player can see at any one time. And there's a spectrum to this. So I'm going to explain a couple of games and kind of how they work, and what I think they're interesting, what I think is interesting about them, but also like kind of like where should you be in that spectrum. So if you take a game like chess gives you all of the information. The only piece of information you don't have in a chess game is what the opponent is going to do. And realistically, if you're both really good players, a lot of those moves can be somewhat predictable because chess is a very mathematical game. It's almost a solvable game in a way. It gives you all of the information. You know where all of the pieces are. You know what all of the pieces can do. You know where they can move, who they can take. And so what ends up happening in chess is, given two players that both understand the rules of the system, right? Given no time limit on turns, if you think about it, the game really just turns into a math problem. It really just turns into a computational contest. It's not necessarily who's the better player. It's like who can do more calculations in their head while they sit there, right? And if it isn't, if you have a time limit on your chess turn, right? It's who can do calculations faster. So it's not. It can be kind of weird in that sense because you take, there's strategy involved, sure, but the strategy is more based on calculation versus best move given with limited information. So the other spectrum of that is complete ambiguity, right? Like not knowing anything. And there's a lot of games that will cover up a lot of details and hide them from the player, and that's a good thing, because one, you don't want to overwhelm players immediately, right? You don't just say here's all the stuff, because that can be kind of overwhelming. But two, it helps to kind of ease into stuff and increase complexity over time. So if you look at something like a fog of war system, right, in RTSs or in a lot of games these days, what a fog of war system does is it basically takes all of this information, right? All of this map, like a map in chess, and just kind of covers it up. And by reducing that information horizon, right? Reducing the amount of information that the player has access to, what you're doing is you're allowing them to be more strategic with their limited information. Now, they're acting upon limited information, which means that given perfect information, what they could be doing is making a mistake, right? But they don't have perfect information. And by limiting the information that you give to the player, it can make more interesting games. I know for me personally, we played Into the Breach on the channel. It was like kind of like one of those game design deep dives that I do with Rick Davidson, which by the way, you should check out his channel if you haven't seen it. But I liked Into the Breach. I thought it was cool, and I've been really into XCOM. I'm really into tactics games. I'm making a tactics game, and I just couldn't get into the Breach. And it's like, it doesn't make sense to me because I love tactics, I love mechs, I love strategy. Like this game has everything that I love. Why don't I like it? And I realized that the game gave me way too much information. And that's why it doesn't work for me, because what I end up doing is like, it's a puzzle, right? Like you have all the information, you just have to do the right things to solve it. And that's different from like a strategy game where you have limited information, you have to make the best decision you have with limited information. And so because the information horizon is so large, it's so far away, in games like Into the Breach. Personally, I don't like them as much just because they require so much more calculation, and that calculation has a lot of other things that come with it, right? So one, you've got increased CPU power in your brain, which generally when I play games I want to do the opposite. I want to reduce the CPU load, not increase it. um you get this emotional feeling of like, and I guess this could be good for depending on different types of players, but like that min maxing of like trying to optimize the best move. um for me, I get joy out of like making a really cool move that did a bunch of cool things, but it also has the opposite effect, whereas like I just constantly think there's a better move. No matter what I do, I just constantly feel like I didn't make the best move, and I feel like there was a better move there. um and that's why, given all that information, sometimes it can be a bad thing. Now, where you put the information horizon, how much information you limit to the player, is really up to you. This comes down to personal preference, really. For me personally, I've realized that in strategy games, I like ambiguity. I like limited information because I think what it incentivizes is kind of this a little more just kind of quick thinking action reflexes, right? Like if something happens and you have limited information, you just kind of got to make a move real quick, versus like if something happens at chess, at least I do, just sit there. Okay, if I go here, you go there. Okay, if I go there, you go. Okay, and then you could do this, and then you take him, and like, okay. And I've got 10,000 moves calculated in my head, right? I just think it takes all the fun out of the game. That's my opinion, though. Where you put the information horizon is really, really important for two reasons. One, like I mentioned in the beginning, for overwhelm, right? Especially in strategy games, I think a lot of this applies to strategy games, but a lot of this can apply to other games as well. So you're really going to have to figure out whether this is something you want to apply to your game. But the first thing is the overwhelm, right? One of the reasons why a Fog of War works really, really well is because it's both a system to start you off with a limited focus, so you're not like worrying about 10,000 things, you're worrying about 3, right? But also it expands over time, meaning that it adds complexity, it kind of builds tension over time, which kind of leads to a cool endpoint in the game. But it eliminates the frustration of like all of the craziness that can happen with just too much info, right? Like you just don't know where to start, especially for newer players. And then two, like it can make things, depending on how much information you give the player, you've got to realize like how much calculation they have to do, right? So in very execution focused, action heavy games, you don't want a lot of information, right? You don't want a ton, because if you can die in like a split second by running in the wrong space, like you got to be very careful on what information you deliver and what information you don't, because like at the end of the day, what's important? Not dying, right? Like if you're in a twitchy, crazy shooter game. But if you're in like a turn-based game, right? And that's why a lot of these, like Into the Breach is a turn-based strategy game. Chess is a turn-based strategy game. So like these games work better turn-based because they have more time for thought, and so the information horizon can be bigger. That being said, separating the concept, the information horizon, how much information you actually give the player, directly influences how long they take and how they operate decision wise. So like you got to think like what your game, your design, what's more fun, for them to just kind of do what they think is right, or for them to like sit there and ponder and really figure out the best move? Which part of that is more fun? And for me personally, I just kind of fall on the side of like, I just want to shoot from the hip, you know? I just want to like move my piece and like, oh, I feel like this is a good move. And you give me too much information, I don't like it. I feel inadequate. I feel like I just could calculate forever. I constantly feel like I do the wrong move. It kind of takes some of the fun out of me. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think I enjoy XCOM more than Into the Breach, is because XCOM, it gives you an entire level, but then like you engage one squad at a time, and then you have all of the information on the squad, and then you got to figure out how to take them out. And then, but even then, there's ambiguity on like, are your shots gonna hit? Are they not? And so it's constantly just kind of problem solving of all the little things that go wrong. Like, oh, my sniper missed. Okay, so how am I going to take this guy out? Because if I don't, he's going to kill my squad member. And so it's like these micro decisions. Whereas like a game like chess with perfect information is these like gigantic macro calculations, right? So you just got to figure out where you want to be on that spectrum of design. For Battleborn Tactics, I'm definitely trying to add a little bit of ambiguity in there. I'm trying to add a little bit of player unknown stuff, some information that they don't have, like where the enemies are going to move, where they're going to attack, that kind of thing, where the attacks are going to land. So I think that makes it more fun because it just turns it into like a problem solving thing instead of like a calculation game. But you know, maybe you got a different idea. Let us know in the comments down below. I said let me let the whole community know in the comments down below. Also head over to the Discord because we're having a daily discussion on this topic. But I want to say thank you to these lovely people right here. They help me keep doing what I'm doing every single weekday, videos Monday through Friday. And I want to say thank you. If you want your name on those lists, you can head over to patreon.com/GameDevUnderground. There's a lot of cool stuff to help you build, finish, and launch better games. But that being said, my name is Tim Roswick, and I will see you again tomorrow.